This video is brought to you by SoundMoneyCampaign.com. Be part of the solution. Visit SoundMoneyCampaign.com today. Hey everyone, this is Elijah Johnson with FinanceAndLiberty.com, and back with us today is Ann Barnhardt, the founder of the former Barnhardt Capital Management. Thank you so much for joining us, Ann.
Oh, thanks for having me back, Elijah, and congratulations to you. I have been watching on the internet, and our last interview is pushing 100,000 views, so I'm really proud of you and good for you.
Well, thank you so much, and it's all because of you that our interview got so many views. You did a great job.
Yeah, you're a good interviewer, too. You do a great job.
Well, thank you, and today I wanted to discuss that Obama announced this weekend that he has decided to use military force against Syria and would seek authorization from Congress. So do you see that the U.S. is going to war with Syria?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you could have seen this coming years and years and years ago. You could have seen this coming before Obama was even quote unquote elected. In early 2008, there were a bunch of people, myself included, who were trying desperately at the time to blow the whistle on Obama, his connections, the fact that he was owned by the Saudis. And if you look at this serious situation and you ask yourself cui bono, which means who benefits from this, clearly the only group that comes out of the United States doing anything in Syria is Saudi Arabia. And it's just all of this information coming back, to quote Reverend Jeremiah Wright, the chicken's coming back home to roost. Look, Obama is an agent of the Muslim Brotherhood. He's owned by the Saudis. His education was bought and paid for by the Saudis. Good grief, there's video all over the internet that was out in public, available widely on the internet, of Percy Sutton, the media mogul and politician and Malcolm X's attorney from Manhattan, from New York City, on the record saying, look, Khalid al-Mansour, who is a Saudi agent, approached me in the mid-1980s and wanted me to write a letter of recommendation to get one of his Saudi proteges into Harvard Law. And the name of that kid that they wanted to place into Harvard Law was Barack Obama. Okay, this is all known. It's been known from the beginning. People like me have been jumping up and down, pointing and screaming about all this, and been called names and told we're insane and, oh, you're a conspiracy theorist. No, I'm just a person who has the stones to parse objective data when it comes down in front of me. Everything Obama has done has been either with the objective of collapsing the United States economy and the United States, the constitutional republic itself, in accord with the Cloward-Piven strategy, or B, has been in service to the Muslim Brotherhood with the objective of destabilizing the entire Muslim world in order to consolidate power underneath the Muslim Brotherhood. And the Muslim Brotherhood is headquartered out of Saudi Arabia. So we look at the Syria situation, and again, we ask the question, cui bono, who benefits? It's Saudi Arabia. And that's it. It's pretty much just Saudi Arabia. Everybody else loses in this. So why is this happening? This is just more of the Obama regimes. And it's not just Obama, understand. It's the entire regime. It's also through the Clinton arm of the Obama regime, through Hillary Clinton's right-hand assistant, and also probable lesbian, I refuse to use the word lover because we don't want to involve the word love in this, lesbian sex partner, it's presumed, Huma Abedin, who is Mrs. Anthony Weiner, the insane psychopath New York City politician who's, sends dirty pictures of himself to children over Twitter and all that. She is the child of two incredibly high-ranking Muslim Brotherhood not just operatives, but two incredibly high-ranking Muslim Brotherhood leadership, both her father and her mother. Her mother is the head of the female ladies auxiliary wing, if you will, of the Muslim Brotherhood. So the infiltration of the former United States government in this usurpation that has happened is coming not just through the Obama side, but it's also coming through the Clinton side. And people would ask the question, why in the world would these people be allying with Muslims? I mean, okay, we can buy the fact that Bill Ayers and these people, that they are a cadre of kind of neo-Stalinist, Marxist oligarchs and wannabe tyrannical oligarchs. We can get our heads around that. What in the world is the deal with this alliance with Islam? It's older than the hills. This has been going on ever since the advent of Marxism. Marxism and Islam have always been in alliances with each other. The Nazis, Hitler was in an alliance with the Mufti of Jerusalem and in a tactical alliance with Islam during World War II. The reason is because they're trying to use each other. Both of them think that they're using each other temporarily, and then once the time is right, they will turn on each other. And the analogy I've made time after time over the last several years is the Hitler-Stalin alliance. So Hitler enters into an alliance with Stalin, thinking that he's going to use Stalin and the Red Army to help advance his cause in Europe. And then when the time is right, he would betray Stalin and turn on him, which he eventually did. And we all know how that worked out. Stalin, on the other hand, is thinking the same thing, except the mirror image. He's thinking, I'm going to enter into an alliance with Hitler. I'm going to let Hitler go roll over Europe and get all of his soldiers killed fighting in Western Europe and so forth. And then as soon as Hitler has Europe basically on a silver platter with a big red bow on it, I'm going to betray my alliance with Hitler, and then I'll just basically have Europe on a, like I said, on a silver platter. That's what Stalin was thinking. So they're both temporarily using each other with the intention of eventually turning on each other and taking over what the other one has. Now think about this, it's exactly the same thing today. These neo-Stalinists are using Islam in order to gain control of basically the big oil producing regions on the planet. And then they think that once the time is right and that they have allowed the Muslim Brotherhood to reform the quote unquote caliphate and consolidate all of this landmass and all of these natural resources and get them under the control of basically one body, then the neo-Stalinists will turn on them, and all of that will be, again, on a silver platter with the big red bow on it. The Muslims see it exactly the same way, but the mirror image. They're going to use these neo-Stalinists, and they're going to use them and use the United States military to help them reform their caliphate. And then once they feel they have critical mass, they will then turn on the neo-Stalinists, and they will expand and steamroll first into Europe. And then eventually they have their eye on infiltrating into the Western Hemisphere, mostly coming in through Mexico and Central America. And that process has already started. So it's there's really nothing new under the sun. You can see what's going on here. We knew who Obama was to a large degree coming in. We knew who the money was behind him. We knew who his support structure was. We can look at these czars and these people that he has surrounded himself with. It isn't just, confessing Musloids that have utterly, completely infiltrated the entirety of the federal government, that now usurp federal government, but it's people who are sympathetic, like, Brennan and all of the people who just bow and scrape to Islam in the military, the people who refuse to say that Nidal Hassan's terrorist attack at Fort Hood was in fact a terrorist attack and an act of jihad, calling it workplace violence. When you see, for lack of a better word, white American people talking that way, bowing and scraping to Islam, what you're seeing are these dynamics playing out, these people who either are in an express alliance with Islam, or who are so morally weak. And I've seen this myself. Men in the military, men in the government, who for them priority number one and number two, three, four, five, six, seven, eight, nine, and 10 is A, the acquisition of power, and B, the preservation of their income, and most especially their pensions. Okay? Does it not strike you as strange that there is not one flag officer, there is not one field grade officer in the United States military who has the stones to stand up, call a press conference, and just call BS on all of this and say, this is insane. We're not doing this anymore. If you want to throw me in prison, if you want to take my pension, go ahead and do it. You know why there aren't any? Because all men of intelligence and integrity have been drummed out of the United States military and the United States government a long time ago. Those guys, they can't even function. They get to a certain rank, and a man who has any integrity at all looks around him and says, these guys around me are just a bunch of politicking whores and psychopaths who are chasing a pension and nothing more, and they would sell their grandmothers to the Nazis for a nickel if they thought they could get away with it. And I can't be a part of this anymore. So most of those guys are gone before they even reach the rank of major. So yeah, I mean, you have to understand, as much as it hurts, as much as it just tears you up inside, our government's been overthrown. The constitutional republic no longer exists, and our quote unquote government is the enemy. It's part and parcel with the Muslim Brotherhood. It's part and parcel with a cadre of neo-Stalinists who are trying to destroy everything and consolidate all of the power and wealth on the planet unto themselves. You cannot be waving the flag anymore and saying, rah, rah, yay, America. America is the good guys. Well, it depends on who you're talking about. Are you talking about the 85-year-old couple who lives next door to you, or the husband is a World War II veteran and the wife is just, the sweetest little woman you'd ever meet in your life? If that's what you're talking about by quote unquote America, then okay, granted, yay, America. If you're talking about the institution as it now exists, if you're talking about the constitutional republic and the government, and I'll even go so far as to say the military as it now exists, no, you have got to get your heads around this. It's like being a German in 1943. Can a German of good conscience and morality in 1943 look around and wave the flag and say, rah, rah, yay, Germany, we're the good guys? No, you aren't. You aren't the good guys until you fix this mess that is your nation and is your government. It's not rah, rah, yay, Germany in 1943 for the Germans, exactly the same way that right now in the former United States of America in 2013, it's wave the stars and stripes and rah, rah, yay, America, we're the good guys. No, hate to break it to you, but we're not. Sorry.
So getting back to the reasons we'd be going to war, am I right that you don't think it has to do with any of the official reasons?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's Saudi Arabia has wanted Syria. If you just look at a map, Saudi Arabia has wanted Syria and wanted Assad out of the way for a long time. And so the whole chemical weapons thing, again, you cannot believe anything that anyone says, most especially anyone in the United States government. If I were a betting man and I had to lay money on the whole thing, it would be a no-brainer for me. I would bet that the Obama regime funneled chemical weapons or whatever to the quote unquote rebels in Syria. And remember who the rebels in Syria are. The rebels in Syria are Al Qaeda, okay? It's Al Qaeda. If we are bombing Assad, we are on the same side with Al Qaeda. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm no fan of Assad either. I wish all of them could lose, and if I could wave a magic wand, they all would lose, and it would have a mushroom cloud over it, and they'd all lose. But if we're talking about the way things are right now, if we are on the side of the quote unquote rebels, we're on the side of Al Qaeda. We know that the Obama regime was running arms and munitions through Benghazi, through Libya, up to Turkey, and then down to these quote unquote rebels in Syria who are Al Qaeda. And remember, Al Qaeda is an operational arm of the Muslim Brotherhood. So that's, if I had to lay money, I would lay money that the Muslim Brotherhood slash Al Qaeda slash rebels in Syria actually were the ones who deployed the chemical weapons. And if you told me, if it came to light eventually, that the Obama regime somehow or another had gotten those chemical weapons into the hands of those Al Qaeda Muslim Brotherhood rebels in Syria, whether it was through Libya or whether it was through some other vector, it wouldn't surprise me one little bit. And if you just stop and think about it, why would Assad do this? Why would Assad use these chemical weapons? He had some traction, and he was quote unquote winning the conflict, the civil war, I guess you'd call it. He actually had traction. Why in the world would he go then do this and risk giving the United States and the UN and whoever else, and giving them a reason to come in and throw the balance of power back onto the rebels and give them an advantage? It makes no tactical sense whatsoever. We know that the Obama regime is all about shadow war and, for example, the Fast and Furious paradigm, where they were sending arms to the Mexican drug cartels and still are. And the Mexican drug cartels would then use those arms to kill Mexican civilians. And the purpose of that, why the Obama regime did that, is because they wanted the optics, okay? They wanted the optics to report in the media that said, look, all of these American arms and munitions are killing all of these Mexican civilians. So they intentionally had Mexican civilians killed. They enabled all of that so that they could then have the optics to advance some sort of gun control agenda. We know that's what these people do. We know that they're capable of this. We know they're psychopaths. We know that they're evil. Is it beyond them, or is it beyond Muslims to kill their own people with chemical weapons in order to create optics? Of course it's not. These people are devoid of morality. Yeah, I mean, you have to understand that the rules of just human decency, and certainly the rules of conventional European-based rules of war, none of this even phases any of these people. These people, I mean, playing dirty is the only way they know how to play. And it reminds me of what we were taught when we were in, junior high and high school about the American Revolution, how the British, the redcoats, would line up in straight lines in their bright red coats and their ranks, and they would quote unquote fight like gentlemen. And they were just taken aback and couldn't understand and couldn't process that the Americans were hiding in the trees and having sniper positions and so forth. Well, gentlemen don't fight like that. And eventually what happened? The redcoats got beat because they couldn't understand what they were up against, and they couldn't change their tactics. It's exactly the same thing here. These people who have overthrown the United States government, this Obama regime, if you think that you can expect them to conduct or comport themselves with even a shred of morality or integrity, oh, you just might as well surrender right now. You cannot appeal to any kind of morality, natural law, anything with these people. You have to fight and prosecute this war against this Obama regime in the full understanding that all they are going to do is lie, cheat, play dirty, double cross, kill their own. I mean, this is I don't understand how people can be so obtuse, especially after this long. But I guess that's just all a function of falling away from God and just being blinded by our own faithlessness. That's all I can come up with.
Do you see the war getting larger than just between the US and Syria? Do you see other countries getting involved as well?
Sure, absolutely. I think Putin is just chomping at the bit. And another thing that really bothers me is I see a lot of people, especially on the conservative side of the spectrum, almost trying to act as apologists for Putin and talk up Putin like he's some great shakes. Putin is exactly the same. He's a psychopathic tyrant, and if he does anything, like for example, his taking a stand against sodomites and sodomite marriage and doing things like banning sodomite protests during the Olympics and so forth, why do you think Putin's doing that? He's not doing it because he is a great proponent of natural law and intrinsic morality and the preservation of marriage and things like that. He's doing it because he knows that by doing that he can gin up some populist support in Russia. He's just playing an angle. He sees that Russia is still conservative enough socially that there will be a positive reaction to that, and so therefore, he is taking a stand against sodomites. But again, he doesn't. If the tide turned and he perceived tomorrow that it would be of more political benefit to him to take the other side and decide with the sodomites, oh, he'd do it in a heartbeat. So don't be looking at Putin because of a couple of token gestures towards the culturally conservative ethnic Christian culture that exists still in Russia and think that he's some great guy. He's sitting and watching this, and there's some pretty compelling intelligence that Obama was also involved with the KGB and probably spent some time in Moscow or in Russia during the 2 years that he was allegedly supposed to have been at Columbia, which we now know that he wasn't. I mean, not a single person ever saw him there. Don't think for a second that Putin, the KGB, and Moscow isn't up to its neck in all of this, because it is. We saw in the news, if it was last week or maybe the week before, that now Saudi Arabia and Moscow are talking to each other about possibly, forming an alliance. And there's been talk all along about when a new global quote unquote currency is formed, that it would be Russia, China, and then the entire Middle East bloc, presumably led by Saudi Arabia, representing petroleum production in the world, and Brazil coming together and being the main building blocks of this new global currency. So Putin's just watching this implosion of the United States, and I would have to think that he's absolutely loving every second of it. And I'm sure that on his long-term plan, 5, 10, 15 years, don't think for a second that he doesn't have his eye on Europe, because Europe's going to collapse at some point too. Who is going to fill in that power vacuum when the entirety of Europe is just, floundering like a fish out of water on the shore, just flopping around? The US isn't going to be able to come in and backstop Europe, because we're just as broke as they are. Who's going to fill that power vacuum? I would assume that Putin thinks it's going to be him and it's going to be Russia.
Do you see the war with Syria having any effect on the petrodollar system?
Of course, absolutely. I mean, the risk of, the risk to the Suez Canal, the risk to the Straits of Hormuz, just cutting off Europe and cutting off U.S. exports as a war weapon. It would be an enormous not necessarily bargaining chip, but more of a chess piece. And yeah, I think you could see absolute catastrophe as a result of this. And all you have to do to collapse the US dollar and the US economy almost overnight is to cut off that oil coming out of the Middle East. Now, I know that our two largest import partners are, well, I know that Canada is number one, certainly, and Mexico is right up there as well. I know how important they are, but we are still, don't kid yourself, we're still dependent on having those X number of barrels per day coming out of the Mid East. And even if you argue that we aren't that dependent on them, I would still think, again, back to that term, the optics of having that cut off instantaneously would be enough to throw people into enough of a panic that, yeah, you could see gas up to $10 a gallon. And then that's pretty much it. That's the end of the US dollar. That's the end of the economy. Because like it or not, the US economy is built on petroleum and the ability to move and transport things. If you cut that off, or if you massively inflate the price overnight, it's economically catastrophic, no question.
So besides oil, how do you see the war affecting the economy? I guess rising prices for oil and gas would really have a bad impact on the economy. Do you see any other effects on the economy that the war would have?
Well, it's war. It's absolutely horrific, and then it all is also somewhat contingent upon whether or not attacks on the North American continent begin. Or perhaps I should rephrase that and say attacks on the North American continent are allowed to happen. Again, just a few strategically placed jihad suicide bomber attacks in the US could almost by themselves, even irrespective of petroleum, if you spread them out enough and it's not just localized to one location like it was mostly in 9/11 of 2001 to lower Manhattan and then of course the Pentagon, if you spread it out all over the country and make enough Americans realize that it's real and it isn't just something that's happening on television, because I'm convinced that that's how 9/11 played to the vast majority of people. The television and entertainment culture is just psychologically poisoned people to the point where they cannot even discern reality from make believe. So I think that subconsciously, a lot of Americans and North Americans watched 9/11 as it was happening and were able to psychologically compartmentalize it as just another TV show, a really, really ugly, horrible TV show. But, it didn't happen to me, and my skyline isn't on fire, so it's no big deal. I guess you could say that I'm shocked that there already hasn't been widespread jihad attacks, like, for example, at shopping malls or something like that. Well placed, spread out suicide jihad attacks would at shopping malls would completely shut down the US economy. I mean, these people, they're terrified. The masculinity is so lacking that people would just stop. People would just stop if they couldn't compartmentalize it and tell themselves that it was just a TV show. If it was something that actually happened in their backyard that they could see and that people that they knew were killed, it would halt the economy. So there's so many ways that this could play out. And again, going back to the Obama regime and their neo-Stalinist roots, what they need in order to completely, totally seize and consolidate power, and this is the tactic all the way back, not just through the history of Marxism, but all the way back through evil tyrannies, is to create chaos. Chaos is how they consolidate power. So when you look at all of this chaos that's coming out of this regime, and you think that, that there's this breathless reportage that, oh, Obama must be so embarrassed now because of this, and Obama must be so humiliated over that, and oh, look at how Obamacare is such a hot steaming mess, and wow, they must be really, really embarrassed by all that. No, they aren't. It's exactly what they want. They want the chaos, they want the fear. And eventually, in order to fully seize and consolidate their power, they're going to have to go just absolute full tilt chaos, which basically implies war on the homeland, war on the North American continent. So I would say that eventually that's where all this is heading. And I said this in 2008 when it became clear that Obama was going to get in. I said this will end with war here in the United States, hot war, people shooting at each other. And the other thing I said is that it will probably end with Red Chinese army boots on the ground in North America before this is all said and done. And it's all happening. It's all happening.
So you really see this war going worldwide? I mean, is this World War III?
Certainly, absolutely. How could it not be? If the United States falls, I mean, how could the rest of the world be isolated from the usurpation and overthrow of the United States by a neo-Stalinist regime that is in an express alliance with Islam? As dominant economically as the US is, and as completely interwoven into the fabric of human culture as the US dollar is, how could the US fall and have it not turn into a world war? I mean, that just doesn't even make any sense. And again, this was all part of the plan. This economy over the last 100 years, the global economy, was set up to be so completely interwoven. Everybody holding everyone else's debt, everybody completely dependent on the US dollar, on this one currency, everything just completely tied together so that when the time came, all they need to do is take out the big boy, and that's us. And once they take out the big boy, the entire rest of the planet will fall into chaos and destabilization. The only, in the near term, the places that will probably be the most stable will be China and Russia, and that's only because they have in place or could raise quickly an incredibly brutal army to keep their own populations under control. I mean, you think about everyone else, and it's just going to turn into Lord of the Flies. So again, don't be fooled by this. Looking and seeing that if this does happen, and looking and seeing relative stability and relative domestic peace in places like Russia and China, well, you can make the same argument for North Korea. North Korea is relatively peaceful, quote unquote, because all of the people there are, well, A, starving to death, and B, under the thumb of a brutal, brutal, brutal military. It will be largely the same thing in Russia and especially China. It will look like peace, but it will only be because the army is so large there, and the tyrannical governments are willing to deploy that army domestically against the people. Um, Everywhere else, it's going to be, like I said, it's probably going to be Lord of the Flies.
So what do people do to prepare? I mean, I know we've talked about, how to protect your finances from an economic collapse, but if it becomes World War III, I mean, that's the last thing that'll be on your mind.
Yeah, it really will be. And this goes back to, I know your forte is metals, and I try to reiterate this on every interview that I give. I am not a metals bug. 10 years, I wasn't a rah-rah, buy gold, buy silver person. The reason that I talk about metals so much now is because metals are your go-to commodity in times of massive uncertainty and war. A, because they're portable, and B, because they are a means of wealth storage. I have so many people email me and say, well, I don't want to buy gold because it won't generate any sort of return. You don't get interest on gold. And I just shake my head and say, dude, you're not understanding what this situation is. The objective right now is not to generate a return on your wealth. The objective right now is to hold your wealth together as much as you possibly can, so that if and when we come out the other side of this and it's time to start rebuilding, you're going to have something in your hand that has some value. Now, granted, if things settle down and new governments form and everything's chill and everything's good, I will stop being a quote unquote metals bug, because yes, when everything's chill and cool and calm, it probably is better to be in other commodities that can generate a return and so forth, intrinsic unto themselves. And my background is agriculture, so I'd probably be big rah agriculture. But if you look back at history, the means of wealth storage and wealth preservation through times of massive economic collapse, massive economic uncertainty, and war is metals. So why wouldn't I be saying yes, raw metals right now for the time being? Also, in terms of prepping, I mean, all the people who have been spending the last 4, 5, 6 years seeing this government being overthrown and stocking up on food, stocking up on water purification, buying and installing fuel tanks and so on and so forth, or getting ready to be able to hit the road. Even those people who are going so far as to prepare for what the world might look like after an electromagnetic pulse attack and your car won't start. Those people are going to look real smart after this all happens, if it happens. And I don't see at this point how it cannot happen. I mean, everything is just lining up. The notion that the Obama regime is just going to walk away from power peacefully, I mean, it's Pollyanna nonsense. It's Pollyanna nonsense. These people are neo-Stalinist psychopath tyrants. They do not get control of the most powerful nation in the history of humanity and then just walk away because, the calendar says it's time to go now. Let me also remind you, these people, according to the quote unquote law, which we all know the rule of law is no longer enforced, but maintaining the facade, they have another 3 years to go according to the facade of the law. Look at the damage that these people have done. Look at what they're doing. Do you think that this is all going to be hunky-dory 3 years from now? I mean, the damage that's being done, and people are so good at denial and deluding themselves and saying, well, you said it was going to be an absolute disaster in 2009. Look at the economy. Look at what's going on. I mean, he is transforming the United States economy into one where most of the people are on the government dole, and the ones that are working can only work part-time. For the love of God, look at what's going on. Look at what's happening. And well, it's okay because the cable's still on and Mickey D's is still flipping burgers. Let me tell you what, the lights were still on the Titanic until the thing actually went under the water. Do you understand that? They are going to do everything they can to keep the cable on and to keep the Mickey D's burgers flinging until the very, very, very last moment, because the people out there are so cowardly and so stupid and so unable to deal with objective reality and what's right in front of them, that people will just tell themselves and delude themselves and sit on their sofas, grown men with their thumbs in their mouths like pacifiers, telling themselves everything's okay because, the Patriots are playing this weekend and the ballroom dancing's on and I can still drive 3 blocks and get a double quarter pounder with cheese. Therefore, nothing's wrong. And we've talked about this before, and I don't want to get into, broken record territory, but there just comes a point, guys. There comes a point where if you're that far gone, then you deserve what you get. And that's what I keep coming back to. We deserve this. We all deserve this. We've allowed this to happen. We've sat by and done nothing. Nobody will declare a strike. Nobody will stand up. No one in the military will stand up. We've all just culturally sat back and watched our culture go to heck in a handbasket. And now we've got, little girls like Miley Cyrus. Apparently, I read on the internet that she was on MTV, which is, basic cable, what you all are paying for, doing dance routines where she's, mock abusing herself sexually and so forth. I mean, come on, guys. You sit by and you subsidize this and you tolerate it, and you think that somehow that we don't deserve to get our butts handed to us. We do. We do. I sometimes, Elijah, I don't even know why I bother doing this ranting and raving. I guess it's just to for my own conscience sake sometimes. And I bet you feel the same way. But there it is. And I guess I'll step off my soapbox for a moment now.
So do you see it's too late to stand up and actually fight against what's happening right now?
No, no, it's never too late to stand up and fight against it, even if critical mass is reached. And you know that in the macro sense, that your country is lost and there's going to be a war. Okay, what about your soul? What about let's focus on you as an individual person. And you say, "Oh, that doesn't matter." Yes, it does. Oh, she's talking about religion again. Yeah, I'm talking about religion again. Here it goes. Do you understand that if nobody has any morality, if no one is willing to just one man step up, draw a line, and say this far and no farther, this far and no flipping farther, then the macro system cannot survive. If the individuals are all as individuals devoid of integrity, and no one is willing to make a stand, and no one is willing to engage in any level of self-sacrifice, then the whole thing, all bets are off. And yes, at the end of the day, when we all die, we will either go to heaven or we will go to hell. Individually, we will be judged. It's not collective, it's individual. You as an individual will be judged by God, and you will spend either eternity in heaven or eternity in hell. You should do everything that you can to make sure that you have acted in accordance with reason and the natural law, and being in conformity with God and his holy church, and get yourself to heaven. Get yourself to heaven. Don't just throw up your hands and say, "Well, this is all so stupid." Well, okay, you're not only going to lose your country and your possessions and your income and your savings and your pension, you might also lose your soul too. I'd be really concerned about that. And again, if you want to attribute anything to my motives, that's it. Dude, I don't want to go to hell. I don't want to go to hell. I don't want to, at the moment of my death, be it later on today or be it decades and decades from now, I will die at some point. And Jesus Christ will look at me, and I don't want him to say, "Why didn't you say anything? Why didn't you do anything?" Nope, you didn't really try, and you didn't really care about your fellow man. You didn't really care about anything. You were completely self-centered. You knew what to say, you saw what was happening, and you didn't do anything. Why didn't you do anything? Please God, I hope that question is never asked me. I hope he says, if anything, you were maybe a little bit too mouthy there, hun, but I don't know. We'll cross that bridge when we come to it.
Well, we'll have to leave it with that. And Barnhardt, where can people find you on the internet?
My website, which has now been remodeled, and it's actually a blog, and it actually has legitimate individual blog posts, is www.barnhardt, BARNHARDT.biz, B-I-Z.
Thank you so much for your time today, Anne.
Thank you, sir.
Go to financeandliberty.com and subscribe for free for more interviews and financial insight.
People like me have been jumping up and down, pointing and screaming about all this, and been called names and told we're insane and, "Oh, you're a conspiracy theorist." No, I'm just a person who has the stones to parse objective data when it comes down in front of me. Everything Obama has done has been either with the objective of collapsing the United States economy and the United States, the constitutional republic itself, in accord with the Cloward-Piven strategy, or B, has been in service to the Muslim Brotherhood with the objective of destabilizing the entire Muslim world in order to consolidate power underneath the Muslim Brotherhood. And the Muslim Brotherhood is headquartered out of Saudi Arabia. So we look at the Syria situation, and again, we ask the question, cui bono, who benefits? It's Saudi Arabia. And that's it. It's pretty much just Saudi Arabia. Everybody else loses in this. So why is this happening? This is just more of the Obama regimes. And it's not just Obama, understand. It's the entire regime. It's also through the Clinton arm of the Obama regime, through Hillary Clinton's deal with this alliance with Islam. It's older than the hills. This has been going on ever since the advent of Marxism. Marxism and Islam have always been in alliances with each other. The Nazis, Hitler was in an alliance with the Mufti of Jerusalem and in a tactical alliance with Islam during World War II. The reason is because they're trying to use each other. Both of them think that they're using each other temporarily, and then once the time is right, they will turn on each other. And the analogy I've made time after time over the last several years is the Hitler-Stalin alliance. So Hitler enters into an alliance with Stalin, thinking that he's going to use Stalin and the Red Army to help advance his cause in Europe. And then when the time is right, he would betray Stalin and turn on him, which he eventually did. And we all know how that worked out. Stalin, on the other hand, is thinking the same thing, except the mirror image. He's thinking, I'm going to enter into an alliance with Hitler. I'm going to let Hitler go roll over Europe and get all of his soldiers killed fighting in Western Europe and so forth. And then as soon as Hitler has Europe basically, if you look at this Syria situation and you ask yourself cui bono, which means who benefits from this? Clearly, the only group that comes out of the United States doing anything in Syria is Saudi Arabia. And it's just all of this information coming back, to quote Reverend Jeremiah Wright, the chicken's coming back home to roost. Look, Obama is an agent of the Muslim Brotherhood. He's owned by the Saudis. His education was bought and paid for by the Saudis. Good grief, there's video all over the internet that was out in public, available widely on the internet, of Percy Sutton, the media mogul and politician and Malcolm X's attorney from Manhattan, from New York City, on the record saying, look, Khalid al-Mansour, who is a Saudi agent, approached me in the mid-1980s and wanted me to write a letter of recommendation to get one of his Saudi proteges into Harvard Law. And the name of that kid that they wanted to place into Harvard Law was Barack Obama. Okay? This is all known. It's been known from the beginning.
This video is brought to you by SoundMoneyCampaign.com. Be part of the solution. Visit SoundMoneyCampaign.com today. Hey everyone, this is Elijah Johnson with FinanceAndLiberty.com. And back with us today is Ann Barnhardt, the founder of the former Barnhardt Capital Management. Thank you so much for joining us, Ann.
Oh, thanks for having me back, Elijah, and congratulations to you. I have been watching on the internet, and our last interview is pushing 100,000 views, so I'm really proud of you and good for you.
Well, thank you so much, and it's all because of you that our interview got so many views. You did a great job.
Oh, you're a good interviewer, too. You do a great job.
Well, thank you. And today I wanted to discuss that Obama announced this weekend that he has decided to use military force against Syria and would seek authorization from Congress. So, do you see that the U.S. is going to war with Syria?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you could have seen this coming years and years and years ago. You could have seen this coming before Obama was even quote unquote elected. In early 2008, there were a bunch of people, myself included, who were trying desperately at the time to blow the whistle on Obama, his connections, the fact that he was owned by the Saudis and right-hand assistant and also probable lesbian. I refuse to use the word lover because we don't want to involve the word love in this. Lesbian sex partner, it's presumed, Huma Abedin, who is Mrs. Anthony Weiner, the insane psychopath New York City politician who's, sends dirty pictures of himself to children over Twitter and all that. She is the child of two incredibly high ranking Muslim Brotherhood, not just operatives, but two incredibly high ranking Muslim Brotherhood leadership, both her father and her mother. Her mother is the head of the female ladies auxiliary wing, if you will, of the Muslim Brotherhood. So the infiltration of the former United States government in this usurpation that has happened is coming not just through the Obama side, but it's also coming through the Clinton side. And people would ask the question, why in the world would these people be allying with Muslims? I mean, okay, we can buy the fact that Bill Ayers and these people, that they are a cadre of kind of neo-Stalinist, Marxist oligarchs and wannabe tyrannical oligarchs. We can get our heads around that. What in the world is the